I'm not pretty anymore.
I want you to be the very best version of yourself that you can be.
Alrighty, that's enough. So now that you've gotten a little preview into what we'll be looking at today, you can probably assume what movie / what director we'll be looking at. However, in case you didn't, I'll tell you. Today we'll be looking at Greta Gerwig, specifically her films Barbie, which was released in 2023, and Lady Bird, which was her first solo film, directorial film, in 2017. Okay, so now that it's established who we're going to be looking at, you may be wondering, well, what about those movies? What are we looking at about those two films? Alright, well, let me tell you. In case you haven't seen either of those movies, or in case you haven't seen both of the movies, don't worry, I'll fill you in later. We are going to be looking at how females are working towards finding their identity outside of what other people expect them to be. Throughout both of the films, we follow these female protagonist characters as they come to that realization that who they thought they were, who they assumed their identity was a part of, isn't actually who they are. It's what society or what their mom wants them to be. This consequently sends them down the rabbit hole of feeling like, well, who am I outside of what these other people want me to be or expect me to be? However, as we follow along their journeys through finding their identity, although it does have its ups and downs, we eventually see them find their own identities once they set aside those expectations. Okay, so as I said earlier, in case you hadn't seen the films, I would make sure to give you a rundown. So here it is. Listen closely. Okay, so the first film analysis we're going to do is of Barbie. So obviously, I don't feel like you need a word-for-word rundown. You don't need a summary of the whole movie, but you need to know how it relates to what I'm telling you about. So, within Barbie, she lives in a world where her identity is naturally decided for her. It's her fixed identity. I mean, she's perfect Barbie, so what do you think she's gonna be? Perfect. And then she begins to experience this identity crisis where she starts to have human thoughts and imperfections. Like her feet that are typically on her toes go flat. And this is the end of the world in Barbie world. And then she begins to have thoughts of death and all of these natural things that for us as humans feel normal, but for us as a Barbie is not allowed. Therefore, consequently, she feels like she doesn't fit in Barbie world anymore, so she takes in a journey and adventure to the real world, where she then figures out she doesn't really fit in there either. This leads Barbie to the realization that she's been characterized by unrealistic characteristics that she no longer fits in. She has these human characteristics that make her not perfect Barbie anymore. So, with that said, she begins to make that decision. She has to question if being Barbie, being perfect Barbie, is for her anymore. And by the end of the movie, we come to the realization that Barbie is choosing to be a human Barbie. She's choosing to be her imperfect version of herself, which is authentically who she is. Okay, now we're going to switch storylines. So now we're moving to Gerwig's first solo film, which was called Lady Bird, which, as I previously said, was released in 2017. So as we're introduced to Christine, we come to the realization that she just does not like who she is at the moment. She doesn't like her hometown. She doesn't like her name. She goes as far to change it to Lady Bird. She's embarrassed of who she is at this point because it's not authentically who she is. As the film progresses, however, we come to the realization that this pressure to be someone that she isn't stems from her mom, who always just says that she wants her to be the best version of herself. And Christine, Lady Bird, says that's not who she is. Who she is isn't this better, greater version. It's who she actually wants to become that she just hasn't had the chance to be yet. So in order to try and find who she is, she goes through these phases, which, as I said, the roller coaster. She goes as far to push her best friend Julie away to try and act cooler or better than who she is. Which then, by the end of the film, she reverts back to Julie before realizing that she needs to figure out who she authentically is. And for her, that meant moving out of the city and finding herself in and of herself, right? Not feeling that pressure to be someone that she isn't. Okay, I hope you're caught up because we got things to do here. The first thing we're going to do is talk about how these characters, as I previously mentioned, have pressure on them constantly to be someone that they aren't. Within the movie Barbie, she says, "I'm stereotypical Barbie." This demonstrates that she is expected to be this version of a Barbie doll that is perfect. That's stereotypical. That's exactly what you'd expect of a Barbie. And so clearly that's not authentically who she is. That's what the brand wants her to be. That's what little girls want her to be, right? I find that Maggie Hempfield really relates back to this well in her article, Feminist Filmmaking and the Future of Global Film Politics, because she's pretty much discussing and arguing that women in film are often expected to do some great thing, some grand scheme with a big meaning that everyone can relate to. So what they give out, what they create and produce is kind of forced upon them based upon external expectations. And I find that this relates really well to Barbie in the sense that Barbie is shaped based upon those external forces. She's forced by Mattel to be this perfect, stereotypical version of a Barbie doll that isn't authentically who she is as a person. So I think that Maggie and Barbie are arguing the same thing in the fact, why do I have to be someone that I'm not to meet the needs of someone else or the expectations of someone else? So found that the argument for this is furthered within Rocco Foltz and Hannah K. Grabotsky's article, Trans Barbie Aesthetics, where they are essentially arguing that Barbie is not just a symbol of femininity, but is a questioning of identity itself. So they essentially are arguing that identity and gender is not something that is just fixed. It's not inherent at birth, but it's more something you learn to perform and act as over time. And I find that that relates really well with Barbie because within the movie, identity is shown to be something that is performed to meet expectations. Barbie is putting on the role of stereotypical Barbie until she no longer can, until her authentic self starts coming through. So she's expected to be this perfect, beautiful, flawless version of herself, and she's performing it. Okay, I'm hoping it's clear now that there is extreme pressure on Barbie to be this perfect version of herself that isn't authentically who she is. Now, I gotta tell you about Christine, who also does not feel like she is authentically who she is. Okay, the first quote from Lady Bird is when her mom says to her, "I want you to be the very best version of yourself that you can be." I don't know about you, but if someone said this to me, I would be ever so slightly offended because what is wrong with who I am? Anyway, so this quote shows that she has a pressure from her mom to be someone that she isn't. And so everything she seems to be doing within the movie is to match what her mom wants, be who other people want her to be, when it is clear that it's not authentically who she is. So this quote to me demonstrates that she feels as though she needs to change in order to be better. Even though she's already forcing herself to be someone she isn't, she's just continuously forcing herself to be different than who she is. Okay, and then the second quote from Lady Bird that kind of demonstrates how she is trying to be someone she isn't is when people ask her where her house is or where she lives, she pretty much just tells them that she lives on the wrong side of the tracks. She doesn't like where she lives. She doesn't like her house. She doesn't want other people to know that about her. She thinks that other people judge her and make her feel less than because of where she lives. Therefore, she just tells them that and moves on with the conversation. This shows that she feels the pressure to hide who she is and try to give off this better, more interesting version of herself. With that, in both films, both of the protagonists, Barbie and Christine, they are clearly shaped by these external expectations that pressure them to become a falsified, better version of who they are rather than allowing them to find their authentic selves. This then leads us into the consequence of they feel incomplete. They feel like they're not good enough. Okay, now we are flipping back to Barbie and specifically in this portion talking about how she no longer feels like she's good enough. She feels less than because she can't uphold this expectation. She's realized that this identity that she's been forced upon, she can't do anymore. So the first quote that really stuck out to me was when she said, "I'm not pretty anymore." This is a clear demonstration that this expectation of being perfect made her feel pretty, and that expectation, now that she can't uphold it anymore, she feels like she's not good enough. She doesn't feel pretty enough, and she feels like she can't fit into this world anymore. This creates a sense of incompleteness because she comes to the realization that her identity was just never truly hers. She's realized that it was based upon external expectations that are impossible to uphold. I find that this portion of the movie relates to Pretty and Patriarchal Pink by Andrea Marathon, in which she is arguing that Barbie isn't actually a representation of challenging hierarchy, but it appears feminist, even though it might not be. So Andrea is essentially, she introduces the idea of the pink mystique, which suggests that womanhood is still tied to being a mother and that leading to identity. And so it essentially demonstrates how Barbie presents a contradiction by showing motherhood as both oppressive but essential to being a woman simultaneously. So the quote from this article that really stood out to me was when Andrea said, "For the first time, Barbie questions her purpose in life as these abject instructions bring her to the brink where meaning collapses." So Barbie is clearly showing that she is questioning her purpose in life. Her identity that she thought was hers, she's realized is impossible to uphold and isn't actually hers. So then the other part of this quote, when it says meaning collapses, it suggests the breakdown that Barbie's experiencing. And then when she goes to the real world and experiences the real world conditions, she becomes confused and unstable and unsure of who she actually is. And so that leads us back to this internal sense of not feeling good enough, not feeling like who she is. Another article that I feel really connects to this is Jane Hughes' article, Plastic People, in which Jane argues that Barbie represents a more constructed, artificial version of reality, specifically how society creates unrealistic pictures of femininity and expectations of femininity. And it kind of breaks down how identity can be viewed as manufactured. Like, it's not real, it's not authentic. So the quote that I'm taking from this is, "This is a world of gleaming surfaces and limited in inferiority. Barbies have no dreams, having already achieved perfection." So this demonstrates that Barbie has a lack of inner depth. There's no portion of it that feels authentic to Barbie, because you know what? It's not authentic to Barbie. So when it says no dreams, it suggests that Barbie has nothing to grow towards, being that she's already perfect, which would explain the sense of emptiness that Barbie is now feeling after realizing that it's not authentically her identity. So Hugh essentially suggests that Barbie is limited in interiority, revealing that perfection does not equate to fulfillment. Like, it instead leaves her feeling empty and incomplete, and especially disconnected from her sense of self. Okay, then, now that we've established that Barbie feels incomplete because of her realization that her identity isn't actually hers, we need to flip to Lady Bird, because in this movie, she expresses how she wishes that she could live through something, demonstrating that Christine feels like her life is very ordinary, that it is missing something important. And you know what that might be? That might be the fact that she is not living her life for her. She is not living her authentic identity. She is living through an identity that other people want her to have. She then follows up this quote saying, "I hate California. I want to go to the East Coast," kind of making mention to the fact that she believes that her identity exists, but just not here. She thinks it exists in the East Coast, somewhere that she can create her own identity, where she can live her authentic life without the concern and pressures of those other expectations. So in short, she feels like she is dissatisfied with where her life is. She's dissatisfied with her identity in the current moment, and she feels as though she's not where she should be. In both of these films, the pressure to meet expectations causes a disconnect and loss of self. So both Barbie and Christine, they very clearly feel incomplete, and they feel disconnected from who they truly are. That then leads both of them to go on a self-discovery journey, each of their own, obviously, in which they eventually find who they authentically are, but it took them leaving behind these expectations and being okay with not meeting these expectations to find their true identity. So finally, Barbie makes the decision to become human. And this is authentically who she is. She had to be okay leaving behind the perfection, the flawlessness, the admired by everyone-ness. She had to be willing to do that and enter the real world. And she realizes then that perfection does not equate to happiness. She also reflects on her past and she realizes that her identity had been previously assigned to her. So she becomes okay with the imperfection of being a human because she realizes that identity is not about meeting expectations, but is instead about embracing her flaws. The same goes for Lady Bird, in which they're in the car with, I think at the time, her ex-boyfriend and two of her new cooler friends. And the ex-boyfriend says, "I fucking hate this song." And she responds, "I love it. And I actually want to go to prom." In this moment, she is standing up and doing what she wants to do. She's not meeting anyone else's expectations because her friends don't want to go to prom. They're too cool for prom. No, she wants to go to prom. So you know what? She is going to go. Whereas previously in the film, she would have just been like, okay, whatever, like, we'll do what you guys want. And so in this moment, she's accepting her authentic self. She's choosing her, right? So in the end, both Barbie and Christine, they find themselves only when they stop trying to be who they aren't. Okay, and then the last quote that I'm going to use to sum up my whole argument is actually from the Moving Pictures textbook in Chapter 9, Women in Cinema. So no one, neither the oppressed nor the oppressor, recognizes it as cultural innovation, a product of history. They all believe it to be a truth that exists outside of themselves, and no one thinks to challenge it. So this quote is essentially saying how identity expectations, in relation to this, what a woman is expected to be or what a woman should be, is not natural, nor is it really real. So they are expectations that are created over time and that are just accepted because they're normal. They're what people see as the truth. That's why women often feel stuck. They don't realize that they have a choice. And when I say women, I'm referring to Barbie and Christine. So within Barbie, she eventually breaks free by realizing that perfection isn't authentically who she is. It's just an expectation. And then within Lady Bird, Christine finds herself when she realizes that she doesn't need to live up to a version of herself that doesn't actually exist. So Gerwig shows that identity isn't just something that we're given. It's something that we have to question. It's something that we have to challenge. And honestly, something that we in and of ourselves have to build for ourselves. It's not something that's just given to us. Okay, you have officially made it to the end. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this, and I hope you have a lovely day and a fantastic summer.